Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Brandstatter, and welcome to this episode of Conversations with. For a long time, Michigan fans have been after me to go back and revisit my time on Michigan Replay, the iconic coaches show with Bo Schembechler, and then Gary Moeller, and finally Lloyd Carr. I co-hosted for 28 years that television show, and it ran for 33. Pretty amazing these days. The background and the behind-the-scenes stories are unique and great history. So I decided it was time to bring Michigan Replay back with all the ins and outs. And wouldn't you know, when I decided to do that, the Bentley Historical Museum decided to digitize over 20 years of Michigan Replay shows and make them available to Wolverine fans to watch from the Bentley website. If you go to myumi.ch/ERGY2, you can get to all the shows. But to talk about the inside story of these shows, you need to hear from the producer of Michigan Replay for 33 years. His name is Bob Lipson, and Michigan Replay was his baby. He was in the middle of it right from the beginning. And I will admit the history of the show is fascinating for Michigan fans who made their fall Sunday mornings revolve around Michigan Replay. Bob and I have been friends for over 40 years now, so it was an easy and interesting conversation with Bob Lipson. So Michigan Replay, the iconic Michigan Replay, is kind of getting a rebirth thanks to the Bentley Historical Museum at Michigan. They're putting all the old episodes up on digital, and you were the producer from the beginning of that show to the Rich Rodriguez era. Bob, welcome to Conversations with, and how did you get that job in the first place?
Hey, I'm the luckiest guy on 2 feet, let me tell you. I was always a Michigan fan, and I had just started working at Channel 7 the year before. And lo and behold, I get a call into the office and saying they're talking about possibly doing a sports show on Michigan, and would you be interested in doing it? And I go, well, you got to be kidding me. How would I ever say no to something like that? And that was very early in 1975. And like I said, I had just started at Channel 7, and so it was a break and a half, and it was just the most fortuitous thing in the world. And that was the beginning of that conversation. And Jim Osborne was the general manager at Channel 7 at the time. What was most funny about that is it just so cracks me up. He was a terrific boss, number one, very lively guy, but he was also the president of the Michigan State Alumni Association at that time, which is kind of ironic that he's okaying doing a Michigan show.
Right.
And there was no Michigan State show at the time. So that was the beginning, yeah. And the program manager met with me, and we met, and then shortly thereafter, there was a meeting put together at the Canopy Restaurant in Brighton. I don't think this even exists there anymore.
I don't think it does either. That's neutral territory between Ann Arbor and Detroit, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it was an iconic restaurant too, as I recall.
Oh yeah.
And so at any rate, we met there. Bo was there, I was there, Jim Osborne, the program manager at Channel 7 was there, and a couple of potential advertiser guys, plus fellow named Bob Foreman, who was with the Alumni Association at the time. There was this big meeting just to go over all of these plans, and basically it was a meet and greet for everybody.
Okay, now I'm going to stop you, and I want to get some information, because there was talk, and the rumor is that there was, prior to Bo having his own show, there was a quote-unquote Bump and Duffy show where it was a Michigan State show. And I am told, and you may have been at the meeting, where Bo was at the meeting said, it's the Bo show or no show. Is that accurate?
That is a direct quote. Yes. Now, that is a true story, and it really happened. And he said, he was, the feeling was at the time when he said it, that there would be no show. But the one was put together. And because he wanted, he saw that remember, this was already 75 when he'd already been there for some time. And he just felt he wanted to branch out and do, build his program with his name only. And it was a tough name to remember, Schembechler.
Yeah. But the other thing too is that part of the whole genesis of getting this program started was to increase Bo's salary, because Canham was notoriously cheap, the athletic director at Michigan at the time. And Bob Foreman, who was the executive director of the Alumni Association, was instrumental with Canham in finding a way to augment Bo's salary, and this TV show was the prime mover in that regard.
That's absolutely true. And it wasn't, and it was a two-folded way of paying him. Obviously, he got paid for doing the show itself, but there was also what they created. This came from the old days down in Alabama with Bear Bryant. It was what they called a crawl at the end of the show, where you would just run a bunch of names, and these people would all pay X amount of dollars to have their name run at the end of the show. It's kind of like within the credit basis. And that money went directly to Bo, and that's really where he made most of his money.
Right,
but he didn't make a lot of money as a head coach.
No, I know, and well, what he came in 1969 for $1,000 more than he was making at Miami of Ohio.
Exactly.
But that crawl at the end, economically, that was so very important, and it wasn't just individuals. There were some companies who jumped in there and said, we want to get our name in there, but we don't want to pay for a full advertising budget. But it was perfect, that scroll, to do what Michigan wanted to do to augment Bo's salary. Is that accurate?
Exactly true. And the thing about them is, yes, there were companies, but quite honestly, these were mostly companies that weren't traditional television advertising companies. These were not the guys that you would normally see a TV ad made from. They would be, industrial companies and things like that that jumped in and were Michigan. Let's face it, they were Michigan fans, and the whole push was really to help Bo.
And it did help. It did help Bo, and that was the whole story. Bo was the coach. You're a youngster, and he has this reputation as the dragon swooping down. When you first met him, what was your impression? You had a preconceived notion that he was kind of a badass, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. He was a frightening kind of a character because of his reputation. Now, you walked on eggs, and I'll be honest with you, even starting the show, the first, I would say, year or two, you walked on eggs a bit because he wasn't confident about. First off, he never loved the media. You know that as well as anybody. He was never a media lover.
It was an adversarial relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. So right up there, and he treated me, even though I tried to tell him I am not the media. I'm not here to do an expose on anybody.
Bob, how many
television? So therefore,
Bob, how many times did you say to him? And I heard you say it, Bo, I'm not the enemy.
There countless times. I could. It would be an endless number. I have no idea how many it would be, but it's true. That's very, very true. And it didn't always. That changed after a couple, 3 years, basically. That's when he knew I wasn't going to do anything to screw things up.
And the other beauty of it is, and this is the next step in a relationship with Bo Schembechler, after a while, and you got to know him and you got to understand his moods and where he was coming from, he became lovable. And you just couldn't do enough for him because he was your buddy. And he acted and treated you the same way.
Yeah. That's right. He would do anything for you. There was no question about it.
It was great to get into that circle, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It was very comfortable, and I tell you, he was to this day, he's one of the people I most admire in my entire life, and I'm no spring chicken, as you well know.
Yeah, we've known each other 40 years, over 40.
Yeah, 40. That's right. And that's the other funny thing about starting the show out. Prior to the Mr. Brandstatter being part of the show, the late great Larry Adderley was the host for 5 years because he was staff at Channel 7 at the time.
And that's where you did the show.
So that made out too.
Yeah, I know. And he was a Spartan, and he actually was a walk-on at Michigan State, but that's where you did the show. He was actually the perfect host for the beginning of that program, right?
Absolutely. From that standpoint, sure. And Bo never really minded that Larry was a Sparty. That didn't bother him in the least because Larry was a true professional and treated straight down the middle.
And in those early years, you did have your moments, didn't you? It wasn't the first show because you were using Coach's film, which was 16 millimeter double sprocket film. For those out there that are film buffs, they would know what that means. And the first show against Wisconsin in 1975, correct, you had a little bit of an issue.
You can safely say that. I would agree with that. The show was, quite honestly, it was live in those early days. It wasn't taped. It started. It was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I think it was the time stop within an hour or so at that time. It was live, and you're right. We had double perf coaches film, which basically showed, 80 yards of the 100-yard field. So everybody, all the players were just little things running around, and it was double sprocket, like you say. And then the projections, we roll it in the first segment. We roll a film for the Michigan versus Wisconsin. The game was at Wisconsin, and and two things happened basically. The end zone said, instead of Wisconsin, it said Nesnatsowa, and Rick Leach became a right-handed quarterback because the film was in backwards.
At least it wasn't upside down.
And that's true. That's right. But so we did fix it in the first commercial break. So the first half was backwards. The second half was corrected.
And what was Bo's comment to you afterwards during the show? He said, "Well, that's interesting that Leach has turned into a right-hander." Exactly. Did he say anything after the show? Like, would you guys get it together?
Absolutely. I mean, he ripped us. That we would do that. Yeah, absolutely, and rightfully so. I couldn't argue with him. It was a huge mistake, and that we used that kind of footage. I think it was the first 2 years before the budget got big enough with the stations to allow us to go out and shoot our own stuff. But it was not a pleasant time, that's for sure.
And when did you sense that Bo kind of got it, that this was a vehicle, this was a decent thing for him, not just from an economic standpoint, but from a reputation standpoint?
I felt maybe midway through the first season even that he was getting really comfortable with it. And what really helped, once again, I'll come back and just give all the kind of plaudits to Larry Adderley, that he made it easy for Bo, and that he was very easy to get in and out of segments, and Bo was comfortable talking about it. He didn't he was really good with the show. That was the other thing about it, is because he had a little cherubic kind of humor about him that as he got more comfortable that he would use. And certainly he used it more than 5 years later when you became the host. Yeah. And the digs he did to you on the air.
Yeah, back in 1980 when I took over, he was a bona fide TV star and he knew it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no question about that. Yeah.
Who came up with the idea? And it's iconic now. After Bo's open heart surgery for his second bypass, you guys did an interview with Larry, and you did it while jogging. And that's become an iconic kind of an interview in the history of Michigan football. Who came up with that, and how did you actually put the logistics together on that? Because back then, that wasn't an easy thing to do.
No, it really wasn't. But once again, I'm not going to say who gets credit for it, because, as you well know, television is a team game. So it was a team that puts that kind of stuff together. And that was the other thing that we had, is that everybody that worked on that show, no matter how big their job was, a cameraman or sound man, they all loved doing it, because you got to remember, these are basically the early days of that kind of television. And so everybody went out of their way to do the very best job they could possibly do. So the idea of the track was obviously because, Bo had the surgery, and it was a perfect vehicle to show and to show that he was a healthy man, that he wasn't going to be handicapped on the sideline. That was part of the reasoning. It was to give confidence to the fans and to the recruits and potential recruits and kids out there that were potential players, that Bo was healthy and he was going to be around for a while. Because the other major thing about that TV show was, as much as it was from an economic standpoint for Bo, it was a recruiting vehicle. Recruiting wasn't the way it was back then, the way it is now, with all these services and all this kind of stuff. So the exposure of the program around the state and around some of the Midwest areas that we put the show in over the years helped from a recruiting standpoint. So that whole jogging thing of showing him being healthy, going around the track was partially just to give confidence to everybody.
One of the other things that, first of all, was a great innovation, I think, and it showed Bo, and it did exactly what you wanted it to do. But the other thing that you also did was you called the show Michigan Replay. You didn't call it the Bo Schembechler Show, and you were the producer, so this was kind of in your ballpark. And why not call it? Because everybody else had, the Duffy Doherty show, the Era Parsegian show. You chose to go a different way. Why?
I did it on purpose because my comment at the time was somewhere, some way, somehow, sometime down the road, Bo will not be the head coach of that television show. But I want that television show to continue, whoever that next guy is. So by calling it Michigan Replay, it allows it to be what it was. It could have a life. Now, what I didn't know at the time how long Bo was going to be around, which God love him. I appreciate the fact that he was around for a long time. But that was one of the reasons. And also the fact that people had a hard time with the name Schembechler. And in fact, I tease everybody. They ask me, how did I get the gig? And I say, well, I could spell Schembechler. That's the reason. But that was the truth, is that I wanted the show to last past Bo's time, and over the years it did, because then Gary came along, and then Lloyd.
And one last thing before we go, those first 5 years with Larry Adderley, again, I did the show for 20 whatever years, number of years I did.
You did the show for 28 years.
28 years. But Larry Adderley in those first 5 years, I thought, again, did a great job with the show. And he's kind of the foundation of where we went, because the format and everything and how that whole thing went together, you and Larry kind of mapped out for those 5 years, and it maintained its way with little subtle changes here or there for the next 28.
Yep. That's absolutely true. The basic show did not change over the years. I mean, once again, technology allowed you to make some changes and do things differently and add different segments and that kind of stuff. And certainly it changed radically from over the 33 years of the show, technology-wise. That allowed us to do certain things. But the basic format did not change over those years. You're right.
That's pretty amazing stuff. The other thing is there was an iconic theme song, and Michigan's got the Victors. It's the greatest fight song in collegiate football. And yet you didn't use that as the theme song to open the show. You used something else. And there was a reason for that too. And it was one of those things where when you tried to change it, you got all kinds of nasty letters. Tell us about your decision on the theme song for the original Michigan Replay.
I did catch a lot of heat when I changed it. I felt that after so many years of running it, that people would be tired of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. I lasted 3 years with a different theme song that I couldn't even tell you what it was before I got so much hate mail that I brought it back again. I spent the genesis of the song is I had everything put together for the show. I was ready to do it. I had the name, I had the graphics, I had everything done. But I didn't have the theme song. And like I say, I did not want to use the Victors because, once again, it was stubborn me. Everybody used the fight song that they're given to school for all of these coaches shows. And there were coaches shows all over the country. So I spent hours and hours and hours on end listening to music, listening to records. And I finally found one that struck a nerve with me. And it was a song from Across 110th Street. It was the theme song by Isaac Hayes.
Yeah, and it came from a movie.
Yep, Across 110th Street. That was the name of the movie. Now, I never told Bo where it came from because it was a movie about drug kingpins and all this kind of stuff. I would never tell him where it came from because he'd have had a fit. Because, drugs were still in sports were a problem, but we didn't get the drugs, but we sure took the music. And I keep the music on my desktop on my computer, and every once in a while I'll play just to remind me of the good old days.
Well, we've got it playing underneath our conversation now, and now we're going to move on to 1980 because you actually took the show and Bo away from Channel 7 and started your own company back in 1980 and came and did the show at Channel 4. That's where I started. What was the genesis of that change?
Okay. I had made a decision at the end of 1979 season going to 1980 that me and another fella who worked freelance at the station we wanted to go into business for ourselves. We wanted to have start our own production company, which we did, the company called CTC. And so we, Channel 7, I told Channel 7 I was leaving and that I wanted to do the show still there. But they said, nope, if you're leaving, we don't want the show anymore. So I then had to start shopping the show around. And I went to Channel 4 and they accepted the show. And that's when I was at the good fortune of latching onto a fellow named Jim Brandstatter,
Lucky
who
I was
happened to be
yeah.
On his honeymoon at that time.
That's right. Lucky I was working at Channel 4 at the time.
That's right. You were staff at Channel 4,
right?
Having to deal with Al Ackerman, and lucky you, and
Joe Pellegrino and a few others.
Yeah. So when we sealed the deal with Channel 4, we got a hold of you, and you came down, and we started. That was September, late August, early September of 1980.
Yeah, and the other thing you did was that, and again, you started taping the show. It was difficult for Coach Schembeckler, but I think he understood the importance of it. You taped it on the same day as the game, usually 8 or 9 o'clock on Saturday night, and then played it Sunday morning, and that became a quote-unquote destination for a lot of Michigan fans. Was that when the show got its most popular?
Yes, there was no question about it. That noonish kind of time slot on Sunday was phenomenal. It just changed everything for us, and made it much more important. And we got great ratings, and it was just a good deal all the way around. And that lasted for, I would say, 3 years or so that we were at Channel 4.
Yep.
In the meantime, you no longer worked at Channel 4, and you were freelancing around.
Yep.
And we cut a deal with Channel 7 and went back to Channel 7 again, and you were able to go with the show.
I know,
and we did it there.
Later on, we went to Channel 2.
Well, that came about simply because of the NFL. When the NFL cut the deal with Fox Television Network to move the NFC games to the Fox Network, that opened up in Detroit, Channel 2 being the affiliate. In Detroit's obviously the major affiliate you have to deal with. So I had the idea that what if we, they created that noon show, the perfect time slot for Michigan Replay. That would be 11:30 on Sunday, preceding the NFL pregame shows, and that's where we became. And that deal worked, and Channel 2 took us in, and we stayed there for years and years and years with that ability because of what the NFL and Fox Broadcasting did. That helped us tremendously, and that having that being the lead-in for the NFL was just beautiful for us.
And the other thing, how much did you have to work to convince Bo? His Saturday, if he played a 1 o'clock game, I mean, his Saturday didn't get done until midnight when he got home because he was driving from Ann Arbor to Detroit, either downtown or Southfield, taping a show and then going back. How hard was it you to convince him this is going to work, this is going to be best thing for the show?
I don't think it was difficult at all because he knew he had to have the exposure. And this is the only way to get it done. He never really fought me on it. And what we did was to make it easy for him, he didn't drive. I remember the early years we had a fellow named Perry. Will Perry worked for Michigan at the time. He drove Bo in. And then one of our favorite all-time cigar chomping guys, I can't say his name all of a sudden.
Oh, Alex Agassi.
Alex Agassi, thank you. Who was just a charmer, and he drove Bo in. And I got to tell you, especially Alex was great for Bo. They'd yak the whole way in and out, and then Bo would do the show, and it wasn't that bad for Bo. He never really complained that much about it. Now, it got to be a problem, quite honestly, when they started doing night games. We played Penn State on the road at night.
Yep.
We played Minnesota at night on the road. And then we'd be taping like 3 and 4 in the morning. And not only was Bo grumpy, someone named Brandstatter was kind of grumpy too.
Because I was broadcasting the games. That's a long day for both of us. But the other thing about Alex, I wanted to go back because he was one of the questions I was going to ask you about. Alex Agassi, old dinosaur, he and Bo were two of a kind.
Yep.
And they would get in the car and they'd take that 45-minute hour drive chomping on cigars, talking about the game. To me, that's a classic example, Bob, of unintended consequences. We got him to be Alex, to be a guy to drive Bo over, so Bo didn't have to drive himself and stay awake, all those things, right? But it turned out that Alex became a conduit for a better Bo on the air because they had such a great time driving over. Bo walked into the show lots of times in a great mood, even after losses.
Absolutely. He would be laughing and enjoying himself because Alex was great therapy for him. They were, like you say, two peas in a pod. They were so similar in personalities. And it was so much fun. And it just made our lives so much easier because Bo was never a problem. Which surprised a lot of people that, because he, once again, you go back even to the later years, he had the reputation of being an SOB, which we knew he wasn't. I mean, some of my favorite stories would be, I remember one time we were at Channel Vision, we were taping at Channel 2, and there was some question about the late great Millie, his wife, at the time, was having a problem with something, and he had a caller, and you had to hear this rough, tough, hard-butted coach talking to Millie. You thought he was, Casper Milquetoast. I mean, yes, dear, okay, dear. Well, you do this, dear, okay, dear. He was just so meek and mild. It was like a totally different human being. It was hysterical.
Yeah,
and these are certain pictures that I have in my mind that will never fade.
And there's another picture, and I want to share it with the people listening to our podcast. Those of you who never got to sit and watch Bo prior to coming into the show, he would sit in a newsroom or a sports office, and he would grab the AP wire copy of all the scores of the football games across college football for the entire day. And watching him read those scores, leaning back in a chair, wasn't that one of those images that will never go away from you, Bob?
Absolutely. And the great thing about it is the way the nicknames that he would give some of the schools, he wouldn't call them, there's someone that they escape me right now, but he would say, Bill and Mary and this kind of stuff, is that William and Mary, this kind of stuff. And he would just do that for a whole bunch of schools, and they did this, and he would give a little commentary about the scores. They got whipped up by so-and-so, and it was hysterical to listen to him.
Oh, I loved it when he goes things like, Bill and Mary beat Hofstra. They're killing them at Hofstra. The other one, remember the story he told us about Wofford and the terrier meat?
That was one of the classics. Yeah. Terrier meat. These are classic things, like you said, we will never, ever, ever forget.
And it's a shame.
They're indelible.
It's a shame that a lot of people didn't get a chance to see him that way because it was such a delight.
Yep.
All right.
No question about it.
So it's at Channel 2, and Bo's walking down the hallway. And I don't know whether you were with me or we were together or whatever, but Bo said, I think this is the end. I'm done after this year. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Were you I was kind of thinking that he had something going on, but I was surprised he actually told us.
Yeah. Which bothered me, to be honest, to tell you the truth. Only because the idea was that you couldn't tell anybody else, okay?
Yeah.
But and I was worried the story would get out because he wanted to keep it under wraps. At the same time, I don't know who else he was telling. And the thing that always bothered me is, what if somebody else he told it? He thought that it was you or me that leaked it. And that always bothered me. I didn't want to know things.
Yeah.
If I didn't know something, I couldn't blab it. The other thing is when there was that situation, but when he almost went to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
We were doing highlight videos for him during those periods.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sitting in the control room at a place called Grace and Wild, a post-production house, and he's having phone conversations with the Texas A&M people. And I gotta find out. I'm calling in all the time to say, is he going? Is he in this video or is he not in this video? Because if he was going to be at Texas A&M, Bo gets axed out of the video naturally. So it went on and on and on. I remember those were trying times, and until I heard the story once again that Millie told Bo, quote unquote, "We are not moving to College Station, Texas." Ergo, he did not go to Texas.
That's right.
But there was a guy named Bright that was going to give him an oil well.
Oh,
That
I
was
know.
the story, at least.
Well,
Yeah.
he told me, he said, not only would my grandchildren be taken care of, but their grandchildren would be taken
Mm-hmm.
care of.
Yep.
Then you move and the transition goes to Mo. And Mo came in, he was such a football coach, but had not yet figured out kind of the media end of the business, had he?
Right. He was more difficult from that standpoint. Yeah. He never did get real comfortable with it. He never did. And which was too bad for Mo, because he was a terrific football coach. He really was. And but it was harder for him.
Yeah.
It really was.
It didn't come as easy. The personality didn't come as easy as it did with Bo. But boy, could he coach. Mo was a great coach, in my opinion.
Well, he opened things up a little bit more than under Bo. I still think back to that touchdown pass to Desmond in the corner of the end zone on fourth down.
Right.
I mean, just those are the kind of things that that I just thank my lucky stars that I was around for.
Yeah, those are great iconic moments that we both witnessed. Now, when Mo came on board, you and I both worried about what are we going to do ratings wise? What's going to do? How much did we take a hit? But it always came back, didn't it?
Yeah. We took a hit initially. We took a hit. Yeah.
Right.
But it did come back and once again, it was because it was Michigan, and Mo won. I mean, we were successful with Mo. And that's still the key to everything. It's how well how's the team doing. That's the big thing. But the thing that always, and once again, the thing that you were on TV as years went on. The teams were on TV more often. I mean, going back to the early days, back 75 to 80, if you got on TV once or twice a year, that was a big deal. But like now, you get every game in the world's on TV. So therefore, people saw the show, but saw the game much more often as years went on because there was more exposure of the game itself. But the ratings, came back and we did fine. There was no problem. It was never an issue of renewal from a station standpoint because of the ratings. Never. And we always had advertisers. And
it was during that period of time with Mo and then Lloyd when the night game started, and it got to be long days, not just for Mo, Lloyd, and I, but you too. You guys had crews. You were on the road doing sound bites in the locker room for bumpers, what we call it.
Sure.
So those became extremely long days, and that was kind of where it became work. I think sometimes home games were no problem, but road games sometimes were a difficult time. But it had to be done that way, right?
That's true. But at the same time, as the years went on, remember. I can't remember the year when they built the control room. We had a studio now in Chrysler Arena, and that's where we did the show. God, I can't remember what year that was. Was that 89 or 90? Whatever.
It was
probably later than that. It was later than that.
It was in Lloyd. Yeah, we never did Mo over there, so it would have been after Mo Lloyd came on.
Right. It was Lloyd came on. Yes, and Tom Goss wanted to build a studio in Chrysler Arena. And I talked him into, I said, if we're going to build a studio, let's do, rather than a cable studio, let's do a full broadcast studio. So he sprung for the extra money because I said we could tape the show there. And that's what we did. And that made things a lot easier for everybody, you, me, and Lloyd, to be able to do the show right there in Chrysler Arena after the game.
It sure did, and especially for the coach because he didn't have to drive into Detroit at 3 or 4 in the morning. Yeah.
That's
now,
right.
The other thing is, Lloyd, the transition between Mo and Lloyd was tough because that none of us wanted to see Mo go the way it happened. And then Lloyd came on, and I thought Lloyd was almost walking on eggshells a little bit the first few months that he was in the job because he didn't want to do and he didn't want to do anything wrong, and he didn't want to do anything to tarnish Mo's memory at all either because he and Mo were good friends. That put him in a tough spot to start Michigan Replay, didn't it?
I absolutely agree. Yeah, that's totally true. It was hard, and because it was such a difficult thing we went through with Mo, and I mean that's to my memory today that how difficult those days were, and Lloyd, because as you said they were very, very close, and back in the days I think it was at Illinois, and so he and once again it was also the experience factor. Lloyd was not the most impulsive person out there. I mean he he had not had the exposure of doing this kind of stuff before. He hadn't been interviewed that much. He didn't have a lot of experience in it. And so, yeah, he walked on eggshells, I would say, initially. But I got to tell you, he sure turned it around over the years.
What I was going to
gave you what for like crazy.
Oh, I know. But what I was going to say was, of all the guys, I mean, Bo started out at a level and got better. Lloyd made the biggest leap, I think, from the beginning to the end of his career as a quote unquote a television and media savvy guy who could handle pretty much anything anybody threw at him. I thought Lloyd was tremendous the last 5, 6, 7 years that he was coaching.
Yep, totally true. Totally true. He really came into his own, and he enjoyed doing it. That was the other thing, which I think helped, because he also liked the exposure. He looked at the value of the show and what it did for him, not only personally and financially and all that, but once again from the whole program standpoint. It was very, he realized it, and he protected me. He really did. That I'm going to be honest with you, tell a lot of school here. They wanted to get rid of me near the last couple of years of Lloyd's reign because they wanted to cut the show back. At that time, we had the show throughout the state of Michigan. We had it in stations in Ohio. We had it in stations in Indiana. We even had a station in Columbus, a UHF station in Columbus, and a station in Massachusetts. And obviously, Lloyd loved all that. But there was a mood of people in the athletic department at that time. They're no longer there, who wanted they wanted to shrink the size of the show, and Lloyd wouldn't let them, and that saved me. Now, it worked out great because when Lloyd retired, I was done, and that was fine. And life goes on. But Lloyd protected me the last couple of years.
The other thing is that you protected Lloyd a lot because the great stories were at 3 or 4 in the morning when we're doing a show on a road night game. He would come in from the office because he would always go to the office while we were editing, and then he would come over when we were ready to tape. And his eyes were bloodshot. He looked awful, and you would lean his head back and throw the Visine in there so that his eyes would get back to. Where did that start? Just because you're not a makeup guy, but boy, you took one look at him and said, at some point, we got to fix this.
I had to. His eyes were awful. They were all bloodshot. And so I had to do that because he just didn't look good. And but boy, when he let me do it, that was the other thing. Is first he was a little reticent at first, but after the first initial time or two, he had he knew that it was the right thing to do. And once again, like he was a real trooper. He said, "This what we got to do is what we got to do." And so yeah, that has slipped my mind. Yes, I was a makeup artist. That's I put the Visine in his eyes.
And then after Lloyd retired, Rich Rodriguez came. Basically, that was your run, and you were done. But you had that's the longest run I think of anybody in any coach's show that I can recall as a producer, right?
Yeah, yep. 33 years. It was phenomenal. 33 years.
Yep.
I have no qualms.
And the key is that a lot of people wonder why isn't it still Michigan Replays, because you took the name with you, didn't you?
Yes, sir. I would not. It was. I knew it was going to be different. Things were going to change. And change is fine for other people, but they weren't going to change. And the show that I had, given my blood, sweat, and tears for 33 years, and it was mine, and I wasn't going to change it. So yeah, I would not let anybody else use it. I refused to allow them to use Michigan Replay.
Well, what I tell people when they say, "Why isn't it still?" and I say, because listen, that was his baby. Yeah. It's one of that. He brought that thing from nowhere to being a pretty iconic show. And I said, that's why Michigan Replay went with it. And they're using the term Inside Michigan Football now, which is okay. Yeah. But you deserve to take Michigan Replay with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I have no qualms. I still think it was the right thing to do.
Yep. And here's a little business here, because Michigan Replay is kind of, as I said at the top of the show, having a little bit of a rebirth thanks to the Bentley Historical Museum in Ann Arbor. They are running episodes from, I think, 1975 until 1992, if I'm not mistaken. And if anybody out there is interested in going and seeing them, and that includes the old commercials, and some of the clothes we wore, and some of the sideburns I had. If you want to go see it, you can go to myumi. That's myumi.ch/ERGY, the numeral 2. That's myumi.ch/ERGY2. And that should take you to the spot where you can actually watch Michigan Replay, produced by this gentleman, Bob Lipson, from 1975 to 92. A couple final questions just to,
Sure.
It doesn't go over football, but it goes over to, you had been involved in football all those years, but you also kind of moved over to basketball. You did the coaches show.
Mm-hmm.
You were involved in a gigantic controversy in 1989 of national importance when Bo Schembechler gave a speak to the basketball team after they had beaten somebody and they were about ready to play Illinois in, I think, national semifinals on their way to a national championship with Steve Fisher as the head coach and for Bill Frieder. And ESPN got hold of the "and I hope we play Illinois" quote from Bo Schembechler and played it nationally. And the reality was, Bob, that you had the rights to that, didn't you? You, not nobody else. CTC had the rights.
Yeah, but it didn't do as much good when you're playing with the ESPN, tell you the truth. But yeah, they stole it off the satellite feed. We had a satellite feed coming out, and they stole it off the satellite feed. That's how they got it, and screwed that over. Yeah.
There was a lot of controversy because Bo said, "What are you guys doing?" I mean, wasn't Bo a little upset about the whole deal?
He was very upset. He was very upset. Yeah, because he didn't want that broadcast around, and I don't blame him. No coach would, or in his case, athletic director. Yeah, would have objected to that. He also had the famous quote about a Michigan fan. Well, when Frieder was leaving, and wasn't going to coach in the NCAA's, Michigan man's going to coach Michigan, and that was the other famous quote that got out. But those were tough. Those were difficult times dealing with Bo as an administrator, not as a coach.
Right, but you had to deflect, and you had to say, "Wait a minute, I never gave this permission away."
Oh,
and
yeah,
yet the cows were out of the barn at that point. There's nothing you could do. You almost had to be Teflon and take the heat.
Sure. Well, there's nothing I was going to do about it. I mean, there's nothing I could do about it. It was done. It was over, and I just had to keep my nose clean and be a good boy for the rest for a while. But yeah, that's absolutely true. He can be mad at me all he wants, and he was. But lucky I had previous many years of dealing with him from a positive standpoint, and I had years afterwards of dealing with him from a positive standpoint. That was a low point.
Yeah. The other comment, and this is a high point. I read something. I was reading an article about you, and like I don't know you, but Bo said once that you were his agent or whatever involved in his public appearances and stuff. And the quote was that you were his agent free of charge because he made so little from your work.
That's 100% true.
He was such a pussycat, though. There were times I'm sure that people would call and say, "Hey, how can I get a hold of Bo? How can I do this?" And you would probably walk up and say, "Hey, I got a guy." How many times? He never said no, did he? That's the other thing about Bo. And you were so close to him in that regard.
Yeah.
He didn't say no very often, did he?
No, very. I can't recall a time he always, we would work something out some way or another that he'd be able to help out, whatever it was. And he never said no. I love the man. I mean, I still think about him all the time, and I miss him dearly. I really do, because he was just the cherubic kind of a character that you can't ever forget. He could be the gruff, tough, heartwarming Big Daddy. I mean, he was everything rolled into one. He was an amazing human being. He really was.
He was that.
And I will always be grateful for him forever for changing my life. And he did.
He did. He changed a lot of our lives, including mine. Yep. So from a guy to end things up, Wayne State grad, you've become this Maizen Blue icon guy.
Yep.
When you started your broadcast career, and you started at, I think, Channel 4 as a stage manager, is that correct? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. Yep.
Did you ever think that the journey would take you where it did? And any comments on that journey?
It just, I am truly, I feel like Lou Gehrig about being the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Things just turned out, and it was so great for not only me, but my family. And I mean, the places they got to go, we went on bowl trips, and that they would get to hang out with all these people. The kids, to this day, my kids are well into adulthood, and they still remember the days of traveling, going to the bowl games and that kind of stuff.
Bob, before you finish, the hot tub in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh my God, the hot tub in Phoenix, Arizona.
Remember for this Fiesta Bowl?
Yes, I remember it very well. That was one of the all-time great bowl games ever.
Absolutely.
That was a great trip. Yes, I remember the hot tub very, very well. You weren't supposed to have any alcohol in those things, I thought.
Well, nobody was watching. Hey, I can't thank you enough. This has been so much fun, and hopefully those folks.
I loved it.
Hey,
yep.
I got so much comment from somebody. They said, hey, why don't you do something about Michigan Replay? We all wonder where it went. And I said, I wonder if Bob would be interested in going on about that. I didn't think you were, whether you wanted to go there or not. But the stories, when I started doing the research and how we were going to talk, I thought about all this stuff. And it has been what a wonderful trip down memory lane. And I want to thank you because you've added so much to it. And I was a part of a lot of it. But coming from you, the producer, it takes on a little bit more credence, if you will. And folks at home who've been after me to do this, here is your shot. Don't miss Conversation with Bob Lipson.
I thank you, Jimmy. It was great for me, too, to remember. I don't get the opportunity very often now to walk down memory lane like this, and with all of these great memories that I have about it. I thank you very much.
That was such fun. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Bob was step by step along the road with a lot of Michigan football history. It was a great ride for both of us. Remember, you can watch old Michigan replays at the U of M Bentley Historical Library website, myumi.ch/ERGY2. Keep an eye on my Facebook page, Jim Brandstatter76, and my Twitter account, @JimBrandstatter, for updates on upcoming episodes of Conversations With. You can also find them at thebrandyshow.com or jimbrandstatter.com or any of your favorite podcast platforms. So long, and enjoy the Conversations With catalog.